A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a great adventure took place.
Talking Bird, a special edition.
Hello and welcome to Talking Bird, the special edition, episode 71. I'm your host, Robert Zachary, along with my co-host whose eyes are itchy, but his third eye is always open, John Llewellyn. Hello, John.
Hello. Yeah, that's cedar season is in full swing here in Austin, but the third eye is immune from such from such earthly irritations.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. This is going to be one of those kind of weeks where it's like, I don't know if iTunes or GarageBand has a deflemization filter, but we'll probably both have to use them. I'm getting over a cold that seemed to just completely dominate my entire holiday time, and John's got seasonal allergies, so, keep us in your prayers.
You'd think by now, I've lived here long enough that I would, go get allergy shots every year or something. Nope!
Yeah, I used to do those. I guess it works, but it's as you get older, it's a pain in the butt. You gotta sit there, and you gotta wait in line, you get the shot, and then they have
sitting there. Am I right? Am I right, America?
Now we have smartphones, so we can do that. But it used to be... Yeah. Last time I had them was a few decades ago, and all we had were old people magazines to sift through, and medical posters about getting immunized. Can't say it. Immunized. Who cares? Why am I saying this?
I'm done with this red book. I was done with it the minute I saw it.
Exactly. But my point is then they give you the shot, and then they have to. Well, at least I don't know what it is for adults. But when I was a kid, you had to sit there for 10 minutes and make sure that you didn't go into a seizure.
You didn't have an allergic reaction to it,
right? And then you'd get this thing the size of a softball on your arm, which is where I used to get my. And then they would tap it, and they go, "Okay, you're good." I'm like, I can't move my arm. I'm not good. I don't know if those still work though. But now everything's over the counter, so. That was talking allergies,
including Flonase. Thank goodness.
Yes.
Exactly. Oh my God, OTC Flonase is.
We're just gonna.
My new hero.
We're just gonna be like, so what kind of meds are you on this week?
Yeah.
Well, I take a decongestant about 2 hours before the show. I want to get my all my areas clear and absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Because. Well, we got to talk about allergies because why? Because we're a little bit bearish on Rogue One.
We've been told we're bearish on Rogue One, everyone. Which I should make clear. I liked the movie. I think you liked the movie.
Yeah.
Right? We liked the movie. I guess and this touches on something I was going to bring up later, but, there's also this constant now, maybe constant is too much, but this sort of sense of, at least in a lot of reviews I've seen, of comparing Rogue One to The Force Awakens, and either you like The Force Awakens better or you like Rogue One better, and we're like, oh, The Force Awakens was just a rehash of the earlier movies. This is actually trying to do something new or whatever.
I don't know about that.
I mean, I feel like you can kind of just take them both on their own because they're different movies trying to do different things, and yes, they're both Star Wars, but they're trying to do different things, and so this constant, again, maybe not constant, but Planck's constant is neither. Constant, let's compare The Force Awakens and Rogue One, and oh my god, I cried after The Force Awakens. I saw someone like say something to Pablo Hidalgo on Twitter about like I cried after The Force Awakens and not in a good way because it was Star Wars was unrecognizable to me, but Rogue One gave me those feelings back. Whatever. I'm like, I'm sure Pablo Hidalgo is really going to appreciate you trashing The Force Awakens. But B, like, just fine. If you liked one and didn't like the other, that's fine. But you don't have to like say one is real Star Wars and the other one isn't, or it's again they're both doing different things. So I will say, and this will come up later. There were things about Rogue One that I did not love.
Right.
And I talked about some of those things last week, and we will talk about a few more of them this week. But I like the movie. I saw it more than once. I wouldn't have seen it more than once if I didn't like it. So.
I will say this. The person who said this to me, we're almost proving his point. We do sound a little defensive about it.
Yeah.
I was like, I sent him he texted me. So this isn't through, you guys hosts, although Sam doesn't have to, he can just text me. Sam, you don't have to use the show thing. You got my number. I actually looked at the
why
response.
am I not getting these texts, Sam? Why am I not getting these texts?
Yeah, we'll get a chain going.
Come on, Sam.
But
let's go.
Do you have an iPhone? Maybe we're iPhone buddies.
No, I don't have it.
See, we're a little bit more mature and older than you, so we have iPhones.
Trend hoppers.
Exactly.
Anyway,
but
if you would like to tell us that we are bearish on Rogue One, or that we are not bearish enough, hosts at talkingbirdcast.com
yes
is the email address, or at talkingbirdcast on Twitter.
I feel, but the funny thing is that I kind of responded to him right away, and then I looked and I'm like, man, I'm being kind of defensive here, and it's like I'm not. He wasn't even criticizing. It was just like all
I'm
he
not
said
bearish. There were
he just said a lot of bearish or something
things that I didn't like about it.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing. I just kind of, and we're going to be doing some more aspects reviews of this, but God, there's so much stuff today. It's like John sent me an outline, and I was actually thinking like getting over a cold. It's like a slow week. I was like, oh, maybe we did a long show, maybe it's a bye week, but man, the amount of like little tidbits that we can talk
and more
about.
Stuff came in today, just a couple hours ago.
Yeah, so it was like, no sleep for the wicked. But
plenty of hashtag content.
So I was like looking at, I was listening to a couple other shows reviews, and it's kind of, I feel like, except for and I have to put this the right way. It's like the shows that are more kind of maybe the Star Wars podcast that maybe their focus isn't necessarily like reviewing the movies. Like I was listening to some toy podcasts, stuff like that. They were doing their year ends, and of course the movie comes out, so they wanted to talk about the movie. And it was like, I feel like a lot of these people that I'm listening to, it's like they don't sugarcoat. It's like some of them are like, I hate the prequels, I hate this, I don't that. So they're very opinionated people, as they are fully entitled to. And I feel like the more opinionated that you are, the more kind of quote bearish that you kind of ended up on Rogue One. It was kind of like, I think it's one of those things like this is the first time when we are kind of, we have so much stuff. I mean, technically people could still be writing think pieces on the Force Awakens, and there's a whole nother movie, and there's a whole nother movie on the horizon, and there's another movie and another, it's like there's three more movies that we know.
Comic books, Rebels is coming back this week.
So I feel like it's like, it's easier to shoot from the hip a little bit on some of these things and be like, if something doesn't necessarily hit every spot you want, it's like, yeah, but there's probably going to be something down the pike that might. But that being said, I would still say, yeah, like I went and saw it. I haven't seen it since the review show. I've been trying to find time. It's really hard to find a 2D screening of that film in Seattle right now. Maybe I'm just not using Fandango correctly or something, but everything is 3D and, or the Cinerama, which is, that's downtown, and there's a whole other concern about parking and timing and stuff like that. But it's kind of like, I'd like to go see it a third time. So we're not anti Rogue One, but I think we definitely, and we talked a little bit before we started recording, just kind of the idea of, this experience of this movie was very different than any other Star Wars movie in the lead up. I felt like I feel like aside from the fact that there was a different, I was confused a little bit, having watched the trailer so many times, and we picked them apart, which I don't know if we picked them apart as much as we did with The Force Awakens. I remember, didn't we do wasn't that the whole thing? Like, we did a 3-hour show just on the first Force Awakens trailer.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
And I don't think we did anything approaching that for Rogue One, but I also felt like I thought I knew more. And in some respects, I feel like I was just way more familiar with what I was getting into when I got there, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could in part be because of what the plot of Rogue One was, and the fact that they kind of put that out there. They're like, yeah, it's a heist movie about stealing the plans for the Death Star. And once you hear that, you kind of know what the basic contours of the movie are going to be.
Right.
It's you're like, oh, okay, so they'll steal the plans for the Death Star. We never see these people again, so chances are they don't survive. We hear who the characters are. We've got this former Imperial pilot. We've got, Jyn Erso, whose father is the one who designed the thing. We've got Cassian Andor, who's a rebel, guy. We've got this old Imperial droid. We've got, Zhang Wen and Donnie Yen. I guess we didn't know that they were, guardians of the Wills. I think maybe even until people saw the movie.
Yeah, I'd never heard anything like that. So
I think they were just said, oh, there are some more people they meet on Jeddah. But once you kind of know, okay, this is a heist movie, and here's kind of the broad strokes of who the characters are, you can probably construct the movie in your head. Not specifically the part, not every story beat, but again, the kind of the broad contours, and so you kind of know what to expect, right? Okay, well, if this is the heist movie, then they have to do X, Y, and Z. Whereas with The Force Awakens, I mean, we really had no idea, right? It was 30 years after Return of the Jedi. They kind of started setting up, what the universe would look like. We knew a little bit about what the galaxy looked like politically with, some of the ancillary material, your comic books and your novels, etc. I feel like we knew more about specific scenes. Like, J.J. Abrams wanted to make his version of the cantina scene, so there's that in there.
Right.
Or, we needed this kind of, there's going to be a scene on a desert planet, right, with this big, basically graveyard for old Imperial and Rebel ships, right? So we got a sense of in specific scenes, but we didn't have as much to go on with how those fit together and what kind of the plot that would tie all of those scenes together would be. Whereas with Rogue One, I feel like we got the opposite, where we kind of knew the skeleton of the plot, but we didn't really know what that would look like specifically.
Yeah, and I was thinking of something that came up before this movie came out, because we really hadn't been really talking about Episode 8, because it's still pretty, they've done a really good job about, I think the only news is they're in, not Bulgaria, but Dubrovnik, filming. They saw some stuff there. We saw a stunt man that might have been wearing...
Don't forget that boat.
Yeah, the boat. And then Luke's thing, and now, since Carrie's passed, that photo came out of her on set. Oscar Isaac had taken of her, and it's obviously she's in some kind of costume because she's wearing the jewelry or whatever. But anyway, in passing or somewhere there, I think they were talking to press for this new Scorsese movie Adam Driver, who's in it, who's like, he's done the whole like super skinny thing. It's like something about missionaries in maybe feudal Japan. Anyway, It looks good. It kind of looks like it might be an interesting movie. It comes out next week or something. Anyway, I think they kind of asked him a little bit about episode 8, and he made this kind of interesting observation or suggestion rather, that he feels that episode 8 shouldn't have a trailer. Now we know that that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
There's no way that they're going to.
Guess what, Adam Driver? They will be promoting that movie.
Exactly. But
including sending you out to talk about it.
Exactly. As uncomfortable as that is, Adam, that's how you make the big bucks. But it did make me think, like, would I be okay with that? Would I let them do that once? Because in some respects, it's like, enjoying the trailers is like kind of like enjoying the movie in like little doses or something, getting ready for it. It's like a ritual, but I feel like maybe some of this, again, a bearish kind of thing is maybe the fact that there were tons of trailers for this movie. There was more of it than even for The Force Awakens. Like, they didn't show any. I don't think they showed. Did we see any full clips of the film before it was released?
I don't know. I mean,
of The Force Awakens.
Yeah, I don't know that we did.
They were showing clips on Fallon. The red carpet coverage from StarWars.com had scenes from the movie.
Because I don't remember. Because when Harrison Ford did that, Wonderful World of Disney,
I think that
show
was,
or whatever.
That was post, I think, wasn't it?
Was that post? Okay. That's what I couldn't remember if that was pre or post. But yeah,
are you talking about the one where it's like you get the seat you like and you get your popcorn?
Yeah. You
smoke a doobie in the Uber, and then you get a nice seat, and then you wait for the lights to go down, and then you sneak out the back. Because I don't watch my own movies. I don't like film.
Don't care for it as a media.
I like cutting up wood, and I like 8 tracks. He just has a big thing in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It's all things on 8 track. But no, I mean, I think it would be kind of interesting if, Oscar Isaac's saying, hey, episode 8's like this kind of like this strange indie film we're on. And there's like kind of, they're saying like, wow, it's like there's all these different kind of actors and stuff, people that aren't necessarily like known for dramatic roles. Like, oh gosh, what's her name? What's the young woman the YouTuber that, she's in it and she's supposedly got a pretty big part, and I've just completely
Kelly something.
Oh yeah, Kelly Marie Tran, and she's in it, and we've got Laura Dern, who's like kind of has, to be honest, except for like Jurassic Park, she's like an indie darling kind of. It's like, could Lucasfilm actually like go, hey, all right, we're gonna do one trailer, and we'll do it in the middle of the thing, and we'll just do maybe teases or something. I mean, I honestly don't think they could do it, but I think it would be something pretty amazing if they tried. Just kind of really being like, just like pictures. And I remember, like, was it one of the early teases for Empire? It just used production photos. You go to the theater and there'd be a shot, of the ice planet. Now, I know you can't do that. It just wouldn't work to just show a picture, but just the idea, if they showed everything kind of like in slices and out of context and out of order, and, and maybe didn't use the music, use kind of, I know a lot of people hate the Force Awakens, the way that the trailer kind of used these weird piano pieces and whatnot. I just feel like maybe that's in this time when I can pick up my phone and literally during this show on a Wednesday, it's like it's constant information. I could be looking at Twitter and going like, information or content. It's like, even last week we were doing the show, and the whole thing with Debbie Reynolds, she had passed away. She'd gone to the hospital in the middle of the show, and I was like, I thought to myself, well, do I stop our conversation, our review, to talk about Debbie Reynolds because she's tangentially connected? But then I'm like, it's just this inundation of information that we have about movies, and I almost wonder if as much as we could say, oh well, the trailers and the teases are part of the fun, is there some point where it's going to be part of the problem? Where it's like, because I think people are so sophisticated. Like, I always thought of myself as like being a sophisticated kid, and I would like, I've bored people with this story again about looking at a thumb-sized photo of the shuttle landing strip in Return of the Jedi with the AT-AT walking to it. And it was just a matte painting. And I saw that in the Starlog magazine, and it, like, for months I was like, oh, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. I mean, the speculating is fun. Without speculation, we wouldn't have a reason to do a show. We would just be some people reading, you know, press releases. But I mean, I'm almost willing to like give up the speculation this round just to try it different. Not that they'd have to do it that way every way. It's just, I'm kind of, you know, like we still don't know what's going on with Luke. You know, we still don't know who's, you know, Rey's family are. We still don't know who Snoke is. We still don't know what kind of position Finn's going to be in now after his injury or whatever. So there's still a lot of mystery. And yeah, it's a perfect opportunity for them to capitalize on that. But, you know, brand, what is it, you know, customer or consumer edification or whatever. I guess if you underinform the consumer, then it's easy for people to get like, well, you know, they might almost react and go, God, they're not really showing a lot. Maybe it's not good.
Right. And again, the point of advertising, promoting these movies is not to hook people like us.
Right.
It's to hook people who, yeah, maybe they saw Rogue One and then they're going to stop paying attention to Star Wars again for 11 more months until suddenly they see an ad for Star Wars. They're like, what, another one?
Yeah.
You know, so that means that they can't just do this kind of, not surreal, but, you know, kind of impressionistic,
right.
You know, ad campaign where where it just says a black screen and Star Wars 2018 or 2017, sorry. You know, or, you know, when I was thinking of kind of what a mysterious ad campaign might be, I was thinking of with The Force Awakens, you know, that shot of John Boyega in his stormtrooper uniform on Jakku just suddenly, like, you know, standing up into frame. You're like, oh, who's this guy?
Right.
And, you know, just doing stuff like that, or closer to the release, you know, when they were doing those, you know, really short teasers, and they had Rey on what we eventually learned was Takodana, with all of the Imperial the First Order ships flying overhead, right? And it was just her looking up and all the ships flying overhead, right? And so there are ways to kind of, I feel like there are ways to get people excited about it, or at least raise awareness that there is a Star Wars movie coming out without kind of giving away too much of the plot or what's happening. But, you know, realistically, they can't only do that. And so then the trick is for people who, it sounds like we are increasingly becoming people who are into this stuff, who want to know about it, but don't want to know too much. The trick is, how do we know what specifically to pay attention to so that we learn enough without going like, oh yeah, I found out too much of this movie before I went into it. I really kind of would have liked the surprise of finding out who Laura Dern's character was rather than knowing it 3 months in advance.
Right. Yeah, and you know, you bringing up the initial Force Awakens teaser, I kind of almost forget how impressionistic that was. You know, it's just so, I mean, is it the word iconoclast? I mean, when something is kind of changing up what you think you know or something, it's just like, all of a sudden, you know, wait, Stormtrooper? No helmet? Black guy? And then there was like a sound of like the probe droid too, because they kind of teased us with that. And then it's like that Sith Lord, you know, like, is this a guy is you know, in the forest, and is that a Sith Lord? And like, you know, who is this lady and why is she riding a a fudge sickle or something like that, you know, and like, you know, the droid. I loved that kind of impressionistic thing, and it was like, but of course that had a lot to do with the fact that like new cast, young cast, diverse cast, and it kind of like popped in this like really perfect way. You know, now that we're kind of like everybody's like on board and it's cool, and the people that had problems are gone or whatever, and it's like that stuff is not going to be as kind of like, oh, this is interesting. So it's like it's going to be more. They're probably going to have to fall back on, you know, story. It can't just be imagery, unless, of course. Then again, if you do like beautiful vistas and things like that, it's like we got beautiful vistas last month. It's kind of like this, you know. One thing you can't really criticize any of these movies is like, you know, like being very exotic and like exciting and draws you in. So it's. I don't know. We're kind of in this. I guess I'm glad I don't market movies for a living, because I think I would just be like pulling my hair out thinking like, how do we make episode 8 exciting without showing too much of Luke Skywalker? Because that's really, he's really the ace in the hole this time. Whereas Finn and Rey and BB-8 were kind of the ace in the hole. And then, you know, the slow reveal and then your Han Solos and whatnot. But I mean, I guess I'm sure they have it well in hand. It's not, I'm not concerned. I was just kind of thinking, intellectually speaking, would it be fun to kind of follow the thread through that he was talking about not doing a trailer, but
yeah. I mean, and to be honest, I mean, these conversations are I'm sure not too dissimilar from ones that they're having inside Lucasfilm, right? Where the, you know, the marketing folks are saying, hey, you need to give us stuff to show to promote this movie. We need to know how to promote this movie. And, you know, some of the creative people or the story group people may say, well, you know, there's some stuff we want to save, or there's some stuff that, you know, some of those emotional moments, like again with The Force Awakens, I mean, that, you know, Chewie, we're home, you know, that moment, it had a big emotional impact to put that in the trailer, right? And whether it had the same emotional impact when you saw it in the movie, if you also saw that trailer, probably varies from person to person. But you know, that's something that it kind of gives away. Oh, okay, so Han and Solo and Chewie are flying the Millennium Falcon again, right? Like, all right, so that's going to be part of the movie,
right?
That, you know, whereas if they hadn't revealed that, then like that becomes a huge, you know, emotional or nostalgic moment in the
when you actually watch
the film. But at the same time, it's like, well, how could we leave that out of the trailer, right? That's going to get people to show up to the movie, right? They're going to see that and go like, oh my god, I have to see this movie. So yeah, so this kind of like push and pull between how much do you reveal, how much do you not reveal, like that goes. I'm sure people are having countless meetings about this as we speak to figure that out. Yeah,
it's like that thing where it's like, yeah, I know, and I've even, you know, made those things like, oh, should we just do approach one movie with that, you know, pick a movie and like we're just going to try to spoil as much of it beforehand and see how we feel about it. And it's like, even when I say it, I'm like, it's that push and the pull. It's like, how much do I really want to know? If I don't want to like walk out of something and just be like, yeah, that's all right. And like, maybe, like I said, trying to tie this back into where we started with this. Like I said, I feel like we knew a little bit more, and especially with like the tie-in book, we kind of knew where Orson Krennic and Galen Erso were going to be. We kind of knew, you know, kind of set the stage a little bit. I mean, also because it goes right into episode 4, but so I think that's maybe where the, you know, kind of our bearish kind of viewpoint of it. But that might just be. I did have you know, before we kind of move on, I did have one of my goofy observations about these movies. I will say that the Rogue One, story-wise, and Force Awakens have one thing in common, and it's that each one of those movies, like the catalyst that gets the story moving, is a defection from like the Empire or the First Order or whatever. It's kind of interesting. You realize it's like that first thing is like when Finn defects and takes off. I mean, that sets everything into motion and exposes that things to the Resistance, that things are far worse than they thought. That there is a super weapon. And so when Bodhi Rook, which we don't actually see Bodhi Rook defect, but we just hear about him and see him post, getting dragged out to Saw Gerrera's thing. Again, an Imperial defector with rumors of a weapon that's far more dangerous than anybody had ever kind of had thought. Now, maybe that's just another one of these ideas where it's like, well, that's the rhythm of Star Wars. It's the ritual of Star Wars where these kind of plot points get recycled, or it's just kind of like, oh, did we do that twice? Whoops.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder, the story group is there to make sure that like no one treads on each other in terms of timeline. They're like, okay, well, this person can't be in two places at once, or this character is going to die, so he can't show up in your thing. But I wonder how much they're paying attention to like story structure. Right. And like, we kind of hit this story beat in 3 different things now. Maybe we don't use that again in your movie, even though, you're writing this movie, maybe think about something, or I don't know how much they're involved there, or whether they see themselves as, and it probably varies by which member of the story group, maybe Kiri Hart it asserts more of that role, whereas others are just like, you're the one writing the movie. Like, as long as you don't suddenly say that Saw Gerrera meets up with Rey and Finn, then we're good.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I just don't know, because you're right. It's like, well, they're gonna have to start. They can't keep coming up with the same plot beats after a while.
Yeah, and it's not like they invented it. I mean, even back to the EU, Kyle Katarn, who is people in the know, he was the original guy that had captured the plans to the Death Star in a video game, and he was a pilot he had defected from the Empire. In the old
and I mean, even outside of the EU, right? What's the thing? There were only like 4 essential conflicts in all of literature. After a while, like you're gonna start recycling some stuff.
Exactly. I mean, there really is only so many plots. But it's just the concept of defection. It's like, General Maydean was in his backstory. He had defected from the Empire. Jan in the Rogue One thing, Jan Dodonna, defector. I mean, that makes sense because the Empire.
At least in the EU, Han Solo defected from the Empire.
Yeah.
We'll see whether that is still the case, but that may be where a thing where they said, we've kind of done this a couple times now. Maybe we need to change his backstory.
It's like, him and Chewie were working at a small mini mart / video store in on Corellia or Nar Shaddaa.
Yeah. Right.
He shows up one day and he can't even get the front of the place open.
Yeah.
No.
He was slinging hash at Dex's Diner
hey, old buddy. But so we kind of dancing around this. Should we get into the last aspect of our review, the part that we didn't talk about?
Yeah, you have a lot to say about the score. You wanted to make sure that we devoted the proper amount of time rather than trying to rush through it last week. So let's talk about Michael Giacchino's score for Rogue One.
So anyway, as people know, there was some kind of schism or whatever. We'll know 10 years from now when Rinsler is hired to come and do the book, and then they hold on to it another 5 years. Right. But as we all know, that originally, with some trepidation, we're pretty sure that John Williams was not going to be returning for these, side stories or anthology movies, and originally it was going to be Alexander Desplat and scheduling, whatever, what have you. He left. And then at the last minute, even though they said everything was scheduled, Michael Giacchino came on had 1 month to score Rogue One. So, I mean, this is being the first, like, cinematic Star Wars that has not, doesn't use. Now, as we all know, it's not that he started from scratch necessarily. He did have the toolbox that he could use. It wasn't like a situation where they said, "Oh, we want to do something completely different, and you're not allowed to use any of the old themes." So it's kind of, and now I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. I wonder if that's an edict from on high, or they started working with Desplat and he was like, no, I'm going to start fresh. I'm not going to use any John Williams, and that may had been a sticking point with them or whatever. So anyway, what we do have here is I picked up I just have it on iTunes. I don't know. Did you actually go out and buy the CD, or are you just listening to it?
No, I gave it a couple listens before deciding whether or not to buy it, and spoiler alert, I did not end up buying it.
Well, why don't we start with you, because I feel like you kind of had a more, not necessarily negative, but it wasn't, you weren't sold on it. So let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. It hits the emotional notes it's supposed to hit when it's supposed to hit them, right? It gets loud in the proper places. It gets quiet in the proper places. He, uses kind of what can be, standard tricks of the trade, I guess I would say, for, building tension. Okay, it gets quiet and you get the strings just going do 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 do, and then a big thing happens, or if it's military movie, you throw a lot of drums in there, and that takes care of it. I thought there were a couple moments that he made some interesting choices regarding instrumentation and orchestration, I guess I should say. Even then, he didn't really go further out of the box than John Williams did in the prequels. And so overall, I kind of found it unmemorable. He was clearly building off of kind of the raw material that John Williams provided in the first 6 movies, maybe even 7. There was a moment that sounded to me, because I re-listened to it again this morning to kind of refresh my memory because I found it unmemorable. But there was a moment that sounded a little bit like Rey's theme, and I don't think that was a hint or anything. I don't think that was him saying, "Oh, so and so is Rey's parents." I think it was just he liked that little snatch of melody and thought it would fit there. I mean, it sounded, again, he was using kind of taking the raw material of the John Williams scores and kind of riffing on it, or at least using that sound world, coming up with a score that wouldn't sound out of place in A New Hope particularly. But I wasn't really, we've talked before about this, and I wasn't really sure how I would react to the score. And I didn't really know whether I would want something close to what John Williams did or something far away from what John Williams did and is doing in the sequels, and that I would kind of need to hear it to decide. And I think I've decided that if you're going to make it sound like John Williams' score for A New Hope, you need to really do it. And that means, I think, maybe more than anything else, kind of memorable themes, right? Memorable melodic themes for specific characters, for specific situations. And he used Rebel Fanfare, or, the Force theme, and the, little, I don't even know if you'd call it a theme or just a riff for the Death Star that was in New Hope, right? He didn't really use the Imperial March. He kind of turned the Imperial March inside out a little bit, but, he definitely used that Death Star, like, da, 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 da. That showed up a couple times. But, he had talked in interviews about Ray's theme and how he, wrote a theme. Jin's theme. He had written a theme for Jin or so, and I guess there was one, but it wasn't very memorable. And I can talk about why in more detail if you want. It just doesn't go anywhere. It just kind of oscillates back and forth between a couple of notes, and there's no real melodic arc to it. It doesn't really travel anywhere on the scale or anything, so it's not really like a hummable tune. And I understand. Look, he had 4.5 weeks to work in. He was probably given some direction of, we would like this to sound. Either he was given explicit direction, or he saw the movie, the rough cut of it, and said, okay, well they clearly were making a movie that will fit in with A New Hope. I need to make music that would fit in with A New Hope, which is all fine and understandable. I guess one of the analogies I thought of was like imitation crab, where it's not actually crab,
right?
It's different pieces of various kinds of whitefish. They've like compressed together and added a little more sodium to, and added probably sugar to or something to make it a little sweet, and added some coloring to, and you're like, well, this is sort of a consistency of compressed crab, and it's perfectly fine. Look, I enjoy imitation crab in a salad periodically, but it's not actually crab, and it's like when you actually sit there and are eating it and are thinking about it, you're like, this isn't actually like crab at all. But it's close enough. We'll call it imitation crab, right? So I kind of feel like that's what Giacchino's score for this was. It's like, yeah, it sort of sounds like it could be parts of A New Hope, some of the quieter bits of A New Hope, but it's, and so like, yeah, it's sort of imitation John Williams, but it's not actually John Williams. And you can, when you sit there and think about it, or sit there and listen to it, like, yeah, you can tell this is someone kind of imitating John Williams and not the real thing. So that's kind of, which, and again, I that sounds like I'm more bearish on the score, and I guess I am pretty bearish on it. If people like the score, great. To me, I didn't find it very memorable. Like it did everything it had to do in service of the movie, but in terms of sitting down and listening to the score outside of watching the movie, I don't really know what. I just didn't find it very memorable. So
yeah,
now, go ahead. Tell me all the ways that I'm wrong.
No, that's not how we operate. No, I had a very different experience with it, and it's kind of like I can see, like, your criticisms. I don't think there's anything there that's not fair. There is a lot of kind of tension, dynamics, quiet dynamics. It's like boom, 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 boom. Yeah, there is a kind of imitation crab kind of take to it, but I've had this weird visceral reaction to the score in the fact that I can't stop listening to it, and it's strange, and I'm enjoying it. It's not a thing like where it's like, oh, this is terrible, try some of this. It's this thing like, for some reason, this score has connected to me in a way that the Force Awakens score didn't. It's like that I would have to kind of go. I'd be looking at more like I'm on my phone and say, oh, what have I put on my phone recently? And Force Awakens score. And I'd put it on and I would go, oh, here's that really awful Star Wars version of Star Wars theme that I hate. That sounds like it was done on a Casio tone keyboard and whatnot. And so as time went on, I don't think I've thrown on the Force Awakens score since, January of 2016. And this thing, it's like, I've listened to it. I've had it in the car. Basically, it's the only music that I've listened to this in December. I'm trying to think. It's like, have I listened to anything other than this? No. And it's kind of funny. I don't know what it is about it, because, I can't sit there and listen. I'm like not off book in the sense that, like, I guess, okay, let me get to before I go that way, let me just probably try to explain it, because I don't have a music. I mean, I love music, and I I play instruments, but I'm not good at it because I don't have any training, so I don't really necessarily have the lexicon to explain this properly. But it's like it's the closest thing to it's the closest thing to that initial A New Hope score, the Star Wars score. Except, yes, the themes aren't necessarily there, but the rest of the score, it reminds me of it so much that I can't help but it almost makes me feel nostalgic, but I'm not, when I listen to it, I can't go, oh, this is the scene when this is happening, and this is the scene which is, if I take the original score, yeah, I can, there used to be this, I remember one time when the special editions came out, and the build up, the very iconic build up of the sound of the music when Alderaan is going to be destroyed or whatever, and they're powering up the reactors, and there's a sound effect of like a subharmonic thing where it goes woo. Well, it happens at a very certain point of the beat. And when I was in the movie theater, this guy like 3 rows ahead of me just goes, and when the note hits, he goes, boom, and that's, and everybody laughs because everybody knows. Yeah. And it's like, and that's one of the things that has really bothered me being a Star Wars fan as the years go on, because George keeps changing the movies, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent about that, but it changes the rhythm of everything. So therefore it's like, things get recycled, the positions of dialogue versus sound effects versus music, they get changed. So a lot of that familiar feel is gone, even because, but the weirdest thing is this feels like the closest to getting back to that familiar kind of, kind of just that palette that Williams did. And I'm honestly not concerned that Giacchino is dipping too heavily from that that palette of his, because I feel like even John Williams, who is an evolving composer, he moved away from that anyway. It's like A New Hope or Star Wars score. It's very different. He never really achieved. He never really attempted to do a score like that for a Star Wars movie. It's like Empire was darker and more grandiose, and Return of the Jedi was like very, any of the battle stuff, like some of the concerts things of, there's one called like the Rebel Fleet and stuff like that. It became almost kind of fairy tale-ish, but bombastic and like, so it was kind of like that one score he did was in this weird thing where it's like, I almost felt like he was a little influenced by, he was influenced by what George was telling him to do, and he might have been influenced a little bit, and this is my take on it, and I have no real evidence other than my opinion. He was a bit influenced by, say, 2001, and even Jerry Goldsmith's take of his score of like Planet of the Apes, which was the other big sci-fi movie of the 70s that kind of, a lot of use of like horns in kind of a way, and like, I don't even know what they're called. It's like those sticks it's like a percussion stick that got used a lot in there, and he never returned to that. I feel like Giacchino was good about, maybe I would agree that he didn't come up with a specific memorable a theme, like, and I will go on later to, I made notes on every track, but I'm not, for the sake of our listeners, I'm not going to go through it. It was mostly for my own edification. But also I would say that the way the CD or the thing was set up, it was a little strange, and getting like, wait, this theme is part of this track, but I thought that this was this, and that kind of...
Yeah, I mean, this happens, I think, even with the John Williams scores, where there will be multiple different cues combined into one track. And so, the track is given a name that probably pertains to like either the biggest moment or what the bulk of the cues in that track pertain to. But there are going to be some moments that are like, well, we've clearly moved past the Jeddah arrival by this point. Like we're deep into Jeddah now. Like this isn't still part of the arrival.
Right.
So, so I think that's just, because they don't want to release a 50-track album where each track is 40 seconds long.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I would say that first and foremost, since we are dealing with this idea, he couldn't do the theme. He didn't get to do the theme because there's no crawl. So basically, he starts with that disorientating stab, And at first, I was like, this really bothers me. I'm like, when I was sitting there on the 15th, I was like, I don't like that. I don't like that. What was that? What was that bullshit? So, sorry, I'm doing it again. But as time goes on and I listen to the CD, it's kind of like it almost serves this thing that kind of wakes you up and like, hey, this isn't what you've had before. It kind of is, but it's not. So don't go in with this expectation kind of thing. And it's like, oh, okay. And then he doesn't ape it the way that you think he's going to, but it's not like he uses that stab a lot. He just uses it once. It's a one-time thing. But yeah, I mean, even in the He's Here For Us, which is that first track, there, I could have sworn I heard a little bit of like some modulation on Across the Stars, the love theme from maybe I've got the wrong piece, but it's like the love theme from episode 2. So it's like he's already kind of quoting some melodies, and well, what's my point? Okay. Let me jump ahead though, because I feel like I'm making a far worse point. It's harder to defend this than to than I thought. But like A Long Road Ahead, which is the second track on the thing, and that's where I will say one of my big criticisms is of this quote, the Rogue One theme, which I guess is what they call it. And it's like that. I really hated that. I will completely say that does not work for me. It's the title theme. It's it sounds like my notes where it's like, it just sounds like sub Avengers type, like a thrown together kind of thing. And it made me kind of worry that in some for a guy who created a really interesting, harmonically complex theme for Star Trek, that I feel like, wow, was Giacchino kind of like shooting his wad 6 years ago? Because he goes, I'm never going to get to do a Star Wars movie, but I get to do a Star Trek movie. So what if I was going to, and JJ's making this Star Trek a lot like Star Wars. So why don't I give it like why don't I give it kind of a Star Wars-y kind of, even though it's not really a Star Wars-esque theme, but like let me put all my energy into making that theme for Star Trek. And I feel like when it came time years later for him to do a Star Trek theme, it was like a Star Wars theme, it was like it left me wanting in a really, like, it's like that's the one I'm really glad that it doesn't get repeated a lot on the CD, but it just feels so anticlimactic and pedestrian. Even in the melody, it's like as it starts to go up the scale before it actually reaches a nice resolution, it almost peters out like, we're gonna go fly for the sky. Probably not. This isn't gonna be we're coming back down to earth, because we're not gonna it's just something like, maybe it was the choice of the key or something. Maybe I'm used to it being pitched, Star Wars main themes, like the heroic themes, to be in a slightly higher key or something like that on the piano or whatever in the orchestra, and it seems like that melody is so in the mid range. It's almost like, well, like that theme is almost like that we had to have a theme, and this is what we're doing. So that criticism, I would, I'm looking at all these notes, and I don't really want to go through them all, but
no, I mean, so to go back to your first point, I will say, it while there aren't a lot of memorable themes, in terms of texture and timbre and all of those good things, it is very reminiscent of the score for A New Hope, when they're running around on the Death Star, or when Luke is hanging out on Tatooine, or all of it. Not if you set aside the music for A New Hope, that is not kind of the big themes or the thematic development or the really big moments. If you set those to the side and just take what's left of A New Hope, the Rogue One score does sound a lot like that. And so, yeah, if you want to capture that feeling and listen to that, and I want to listen to something that sounds like that, but doesn't just travel through the same groove in my brain that I know constantly and that I won't even listen to, then I could see the Rogue One score being appealing. I mean, the other, so yeah, I can see that. I'll say, I'll leave it there rather than
it's that, and that's the thing. What I get from the Star Wars, the big themes are great, and they're and the trumpets blast.
Sorry, I thought I had muted the microphone. Sorry about that.
It's all right, but it's just like the interstitial stuff, like I think of A New Hope, and I like the music that's playing when Obi-Wan is sneaking, when everybody's sneaking around on the Death Star, and it's kind of like that kind of stuff. And I feel like Giacchino really kind of got that kind of feel to it. And it's like, I mean, a lot of my notes here are just kind of like, some kind of like, what are they doing? Too much tribal drums and that. So, I mean, I have my criticisms of it. Like Jedi Arrival, it was interesting because it kind of has this kind of melancholy to it. And like, and he uses the sticks, which I honestly don't know what the orchestral name of these things are, but I think it's like a bundle of like sticks and you clack them against something. I've heard it, and Williams has used it a lot. And I swear I can hear some like underpinning of electric bass in some weird, not like riffing where it like gets to be like, oh geez, why is there like fuzz bass on this Star Wars thing? But it's like underpinned with some piano and some synth, and it's like it builds a kind of like, it almost made me go like, I don't remember hearing this in the movie or kind of thing, because I really didn't experience the music. Right. A lot of people that when they walk away from the movie, they kind of go, okay, what'd you think of the music? Like, it was all right. And I feel like maybe either because of the mixing or whatever, or the nature of the story, it was like, it's almost like the music kind of doesn't get a chance to get heard. But I mean, there's like a theme, and I think it comes from it's Krennic's aspirations, where it's a kind of his theme. It's the same one. It's like, I think when his shuttle approaches, oh Jesus, when his shuttle approaches Mustafar or whatever. I like Krennic. Krennic kind of has a theme. And
he kind of does.
And it's like this almost kind of it has an implication of the Imperial March in it, kind of, and it's kind of different because it's like this kind of oh geez, I'm so inarticulate when it comes to this kind of stuff. It's just like I'm trying to get this apart, where it feels like it's almost like the bargain basement version of like an Imperial theme, and I mean it in a good way, in the fact that in some ways Krennic is constantly is shown to be the bargain basement Imperial, that he is absolutely he's absolutely like caught up in the bureaucracy that is the Empire, because he thinks that like, if I just show them that I got the stuff, they're gonna love me. And it's like, no, dude, the die has been cast. You're not. You're dealing with people here that have been doing this stuff for 40 years. You're not gonna all of a sudden be sitting at the right hand of the Emperor in a purple outfit, advising him. And I guess so. I was after I had seen the movie, I was like, okay, I can start reading through Pablo Hidalgo's Twitter feed now, where people are asking him questions about this movie. And someone presented to him a comparison that he agreed with, and he said this was exactly the comparison that was in his mind when they were developing Catalyst, which is Krennic as Salieri from Amadeus. Right. And I'll say, I mean, that is one of the references that came to mind when I was reading Catalyst. And so now I know why. It's because that's exactly what they were going for. Right. That Krennic, he started out as an engineer himself. He's unlike Salieri in that,
I think early on he kind of realized where his talent lay, and you know, kind of decided to go into the bureaucracy and become a manager of engineers rather than, you know, try to make some scientific breakthrough through himself. But yeah, you know, but the sense that, you know, maybe he, you know, keeps trying to exert his power and authority over Galen Erso because in some sense he knows that, you know, Galen Erso is the superior scientist. You know, all of that stuff comes into it, certainly. And so, you know, I think Ben Mendelsohn was really good in Rogue One, and I kind of wish that some more of that backstory and the relationship between him and the Erso family that was in Catalyst, I wish some of that had been in Rogue One. Like, so right. I alluded last week to a couple of like structural or story things that like, oh, I would have done that differently. And one of the things that I thought about the second time that I was watching the movie was I think it would have been interesting if they had started out with what we'll call current day Jyn Erso, adult Jyn Erso in jail, in prison, in Imperial prison. And, you know, show her like maybe go through a day with her or, you know, an hour with her or whatever. And then she's like flashing back, you know, you see her in prison first and then you see her flash back to when she was a child and kind of show a series of dreams or flashbacks or whatever to show her how she got to that point and to give both a little more backstory to Krennic's relationship to the Erso family, and then also a little more backstory to her relationship with Saw Gerrera. Because basically we just see Saw Gerrera show up and say, "Come with me, child," and then we have that conversation between her and adult Jyn and Saw Gerrera, where she's like, "You left me alone," and she's like, "You were my best soldier. You were already my best soldier. I was 16." You know, that. And so like, okay, so we abandoned her, but we don't ever really see what their relationship when he was essentially raising her was like, and that, so I kind of wanted more of that. But you know, with the Krennic Erso thing, you know, because you just get hints of it when in the dream or the flashback, whatever, the prologue, when you have young Jyn Erso and Krennic, you know, Ben Mendelsohn, you know, refers to her as like the child or a child or whatever.
Yeah.
And then when she's adult Jyn Erso, even after she's called out Papa, you know, he's still like, "Who are you?" Right? Just this idea that he's completely forgotten that this child exists, which is, I mean, it's made very, it's developed a lot more in Catalyst. This idea that like Krennic can't even like refer to Jyn by name. He just keeps calling her the child. Like even when he's talking to her parents, like, "Oh, so how is the child?" Right? Just this idea of this child is so foreign to him, and like he just doesn't care.
Right.
Like I kind of wish we had gotten a few more of those moments in the movie, because then that would have made that scene where he was like, "Who are you?" Like, well, like you just heard her call out Papa. Like you probably have a guess as to who that is. But for the fact that he just doesn't give her a second thought ever, like even when the Ursos were living on Coruscant and he was like seeing them every day. So in terms of the music, yeah, I did take note even the first time I saw it that like, oh, they're kind of giving Krennic a theme, but then I just wish it had shown up more. And even, you know, at the end of the movie, I don't think we really hear it. We don't hear that same kind of theme or that same fanfare march, whatever it is, that we get when Krennic arrives on Yadu. We don't,
right.
Or Edu, excuse me. We don't get it. I don't think we get it again when he's on Scarif, or at, you know, at the very end. And there's a way John Williams would have, you know, found a way to kind of weave that theme with the Jyn Erso theme together to like make some statement about, you know, there are two fates, that these two, you know, Krennic and the Erso family have been linked, you know, even since before, you know, since Jyn was born, essentially, and how that is culminating in this Battle of Battle of Scarif. And it's just that kind of thematic development, in addition to a lack of kind of memorable themes, when Giacchino did develop some themes, right? There's the Jyn Erso theme or the Hope theme or whatever he calls it in the liner in the
right
CD, and then whatever we get for Krennic. I feel like we don't really hear those things once or twice. The Jyn Erso thing we hear multiple times, but I don't ever feel like it's different. Like he never really develops it as a melody, as a theme. It's just, it's louder now. Right, here it is. Did you hear it before? Well, here it is really loud now. Like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
yeah, I get it. So that, like, I think, again, some of that I think is Giacchino, because I talked about this before we saw Rogue One. I listened to some of his stuff, and I also found that a little unmemorable. But I think it's also a function of, right, he had 4.5 weeks to work with. The fact that he got anything done is sort of, a thing to celebrate. Just the fact that they had to score it all, given that 4.5 week time crunch. And then also, maybe that's a function of what he was shown, kind of his interpretation. That's his interpretation of the footage he saw, right? And so at least again, me personally, I talked about this last week too, that I felt like there wasn't a whole lot of character development. Like, we were kind of told who these characters were, and then we were shown that they were different, but there wasn't a whole lot of like arc to these things. Like, okay, yeah, Jyn was mad at Cassian for almost following orders and almost trying to shoot her father, and then she wasn't mad at him anymore. Right. It's like, is that a development in their relationship, or is that just like she knew she needed help, and here are these 20 people saying they were willing to help? And so he was like, yeah, whatever we can get. I don't know how much of it is Giacchino himself and his style, and maybe it just doesn't resonate with me personally, and how much of it was the time crunch, and how much of it was just based on his reaction to the movie, and maybe he didn't. I'm sure he enjoyed the movie, but maybe he didn't see that there was a lot of room for, now let me kind of put in 8 different permutations of the Jyn Erso theme in different keys, and I'll just hint at it with a couple notes in the bass clarinets, and then I'll hint at it a couple notes in the piccolos, and then I'll give the percussion the same rhythm, and I just feel like maybe that just wasn't available to him to do that, and again, maybe that's not a thing he would do anyway, but I'm not necessarily saying this is all because, like, I don't think he's good. It's just the score itself. I'm describing it to the score itself. Just, I think there was a lot more room for that kind of thematic development in the music that I didn't pick up on it.
Yeah, and I honestly, as you're saying this, I think I realize that's the big difference between how you and I enjoy or not enjoy this. And I think that's because I like the stuff that's not the theme. And I just, even though it can be a little repetitious, like I agree. And like sometimes the use of the war drums are kind of like, but then again, when you go to like a track like, the act track, and it's like, there's just, which in my notes, it was like, he's just, he's dropped all pretense. He's just copying John Williams in some respects. And it's like, there's just this great slamming, like, percussion that, it's not, you can't tell if it's quite drums or like with a mixture of pizzicato and whatever. And it's like, boom, boom, boom. And I'm just like, yeah, it's like that thing like you had said in some of the notes about another thing about Rogue One. It's like how you remember it, not how it was kind of idea, where I feel like that's kind of what the music did for me. It's like, it is where what you were talking about in the context of art, where it's like, I feel like, in some respects, like if I sat down with A New Hope and listened to that score and then listen to this, I might just be completely like, yeah, John's right about everything here, because it's like, and also I don't have the, like I said, I
don't want this to turn into a Gareth Edwards Godzilla situation.
No, it's all right. No, I'm still gonna listen to it. I still enjoy it, and I'll be honest, like some of the like, and I unfortunately I listened to this a couple times and then I didn't start taking notes until last night, and I couldn't find the piece. Maybe it's in because I didn't get to the suites at the end this time. That there's some great like, and I think that might have to do with a little bit because you and I don't talk a lot about music in general, about what we like about music, and so it's hard to even know where we're coming from. But it's like I get as time goes on, I like enjoy. I'm gonna say I always say it's timbre. Is it? It's not timbre. It's timbre. Right? Timbre. Thank you, Jeffrey Tambor. I enjoy that almost more than melody in some respects as time goes on. Like I like people doing things like where I go, oh, this guy, he's obviously they're playing behind the bridge of the cello. I can tell. That kind of stuff is almost like it's because like with a Star Wars movie, the sound effects and the music, at least as in the early ones, and they were less good about doing this as time went on. It's like the music, the sound effects, the dialogue. It was almost one piece of music. So like when you almost listen to them separately, you can almost hear the missing pieces. Yeah. And I feel like Giacchino is really good with that. And I really enjoyed his early score on the first couple seasons of Lost because it was a lot of that kind of like, and you had to listen to it really like, had to turn it up on your headphones because otherwise you were going to miss it. And with movie scores, that's what I like.
Well, I will say, I also enjoy all of those aspects of the John Williams scores for the original trilogy and the prequels too. But that aren't okay. Here's Luke's theme, and here's Leia's theme, and here's the Imperial March. Those things are great too. But I do really enjoy. For a while, I was considering writing a blog post for our website about kind of appreciating some of those quieter moments and all of the different orchestral things he does and those timbral things he does, John Williams does, and so I do like those a lot. And I will say when I have listened to, I guess I've listened to it 3 or 4 times now, the Rogue One score, in the moment I think, oh yeah, that's kind of interesting. Or like, oh yeah, that does remind me of A New Hope, and that is a thing that I like in the A New Hope score, and so yeah, I like it here too. But it's just afterwards, I couldn't tell you like what those moments were. And when I talk about the lack of themes and thematic development and why I think and why that influences my opinion of the score, a lot of that is because it's sort of, to go back to that imitation crab analogy, it's right because all of these other things that you're doing, all of those timbral things and borrowing the Force theme and the Death Star little theme or fanfare or whatever, all of these other signals, Giacchino is providing all of these other signals that, he is building, he is essentially reconstructing a John Williams type score. But yeah. as soon as you signal that, then to me, like, such a big part of the John Williams Star Wars scores are those themes, and so without it, then it's like it's not really quite there. It doesn't quite make it for me. And so if that's the case, then I would have maybe liked to see him do more of those things, like some of the music from Jeddah, where you were talking about there's electric bass, or there's some kind of electronic keyboards that he uses, right. Or who knows, maybe he even like runs a bow across an electric guitar or something. I don't, right. those kind of things, which again is not super far outside the realm of, it's within the realm of what fits in a Star Wars score. If those kind of notes that mark, the beginning of that, Jedi Arrival track, they remind me a lot of the use of the didgeridoo in Phantom Menace. As this kind of like, yeah, just marking this kind of, we're someplace new, or here's this kind of exotic thing we haven't seen before. And Lucas used electric guitar in episode 2, and he used all of these different kind of orchestration ideas in the prequels. And so, I kind of wanted more of that stuff in the score, because like, okay, well, if you're not giving us these like big themes, that's fine. But if you're going to try to do kind of like an imitation John Williams score and not do that, then I feel like maybe we're all just better off like just doing something completely different. And so that I'm very interested now to figure out or to hear what this Han Solo movie score is going to sound like, because I mean, the indications are we've gotten right. This is like nothing you've ever seen before, man. And breaking all the rules. And so Wars. I'm kind of curious now to see, okay, well, I say that, well, at least I say that I want that now. And so I'll be interested to hear something. I kind of want to hear a Star Wars score that is radically different, to see whether I like it or whether I'm just kind of full of it. And I go like, well, no, maybe more like the Rogue One score, please.
See, and that's the thing.
How full of it I am.
I kind
of want to see that.
I think I would be, if I'm being honest, I think at the end of the day, I think I want something that's just evocative of John Williams. I think if it wasn't, I think it would bothered me more. If it had been like, oh, we're going to have, who's the guy who's worked with Quentin Tarantino? He was in Wu-Tang. If they hired him to do something and it was like, he used samples or things like that, and it's like, oh, we like, if it wasn't like a hip hop thing, it was like, oh, I sampled and contextualized a lot of world music or something. Like, I don't know if I would be necessarily super excited about like that much experimentation in my Star Wars music. I mean, but then again, it's like, I was thinking of, back to before I was saying, I think it's When Has Become Now is the track which has the critic theme. And then my note is that it sounds like something kind of from Ben-Hur, and it's I call it the store brand Imperial March. So if like you were just going to buy like, you go to like, oh, well, I can't afford the real one, let's get the store brand, but it's still pretty good.
Right. I mean, and considering that, Ben-Hur and movies like that made up, part of the temp score, where the temp, right, kind of editing together of some of the original trilogy and the prequels that John Williams may have been basing some of his music off of. Then, if you're going to reconfigure that, then it's probably going to sound close to what the original material might have sounded like.
Exactly.
There's that aspect as well.
And that's why I kind of feel like some of this work on these tracks, like especially that theme, it's that he's in some ways going back. Yeah, like you said, he's reinterpreting it, but the end result becomes something similar or something even kind of inferior to what Williams had done 40 years ago. But like I said, aside from that main theme that I just, like, I was like, when the title came up in the theater, I'm like, really? This is what you did? It's like, that's the, it makes me think that he really did work up to the last minute, because I can't imagine that would have been, he's probably like, I've got a Star Wars theme in the back of my head and I've had it my entire life. And I don't think that's it,
Right.
Like in Trust Goes Both Ways. Are you familiar with that instrument called the waterphone?
Yeah.
Do you think that was, I mean, obviously you probably weren't listening to it a whole bunch, but it's like, I think there's some waterphone in that, which I always like. It's a,
yeah, there could be.
It gets used. So now, ever since that, I think there's like a 5-minute YouTube video about the waterphone. Everybody is now a waterphone expert. It's incredibly expensive for people who don't know what a waterphone is. Basically, it's like a brass bowl that you can put water in and hold. It's like a closed bowl with a stem and it has a row of brass tines, and you can
go all the way around.
You can play it
of different lengths, so they make different notes.
Yeah, and it's more as an atonal kind of thing. I don't think you could play a melody on unless you're like really good at it.
It's more of that kind of timbral stuff.
Yeah, it's bowed. You modulate the modulation wheel, as they would say in a keyboard, is basically you rotating it on your wrist with fluid inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was used heavily in the movie Phantasm. So I always like that. And I would like the last thing I will say on this score, and then we should move on to some other stuff. But is that I will say that there's one piece that I really. Oh, now my notes are out of thing. There was also like a weird digital ping pong delay used on one track that I thought was kind of like, oh, geez, Giacchino's got guitar pedals.
Interesting.
Is the
and see I wanted more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was like, because
you go like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was like I had earbuds on and it was bouncing back and forth, and I'm like, oh, that's nice. So I will say this, and obviously you're totally free to disagree with me. The piece "Your Father Would Be Proud," I would say overall was probably the best piece in this, which I think is basically played right before our heroes die. And it's the kind of thing, like every time I put it on, I honestly do get that kind of that visceral kind of melancholy that and maybe it's one of those things where it's a mixing thing, it's a placement in the movie thing that I didn't actually get when I don't remember getting when I was watching the movie. It's like, I don't really remember what was playing when Han Solo got ran through by his own son, but I do remember how I felt when it happened. Although I don't remember feeling like extremely melancholy during the death scene of Cassian and Jin, but this music out of context, it almost kind of, and when I think of like, oh yeah, okay, I do remember it from this, I did feel a lot more emotion. It's like there's a kind of like, open piano is, that kind of, I don't even know what they call it. It just, and there's some choir and stuff. It's just really, I really like that piece. So if there was one thing that, the problem is I don't know if you just went to that piece and listened to it, you get the same emotion without the kind of the build up of listening to the whole score. But I really like that. And, maybe it's a little kind of, it falls within that realm of, some people were really mad when they were using just simple piano to kind of restate themes in the trailers for The Force Awakens. And they're like, I hate the fact that trailers are just these kind of echoey pianos. And it's like, it's almost like movie scores have become like Coldplay songs. But there was something very comforting, but also emotional about that one track. And I would say it's a little strange, though. It makes me realize that as much as everybody, I love the Vader stuff and the way they tie it in, they really did a kind of a weird thing in this movie by undercutting the death of their heroes by like going like, yeah, that's all beautiful and everything, but here's Darth Vader, running a bunch of people through, and here's the CGI of Princess Leia, and here's that's all well and good, but A New Hope, this is going to be the real meat of the matter. And it's I almost feel like in some ways the editing of the film, the way they did that, it's like the much you said, the way they could have repositioned the movie where the stuff on the planet with Galen and the mom and stuff like that could have been achieved in flashback. And I even think I read somewhere that some of that is how it was originally positioned. There might have been something about the idea that they should have maybe the movie should have ended with Jin and Cassian's dying with that planet with that city explaining, like the fact that they had to tie in, like, oh, we have to tie in this movie, which everybody's going to go see that movie anyway. There's no real need to tie it in so directly, except for the fact that it looks really cool. And out of context, it works, which is a thing that I've noticed now, because if you go on YouTube, whereas The Force Awakens, like, it took months for bootlegs to hit the net with that. The bootlegs for Rogue One were up almost, like, I came home and just, I personally, I don't download them. It's one of the things I just don't. It's like, I feel like these people put in all this work, and it might actually, if I see it so much, I might actually not go to the theater to see it. And two, it's just like, I don't want to lose my house over downloading a movie, getting sued or something. But they put up these clips of just just these parts of the movie. And it does kind of point out that they are kind of, if you could just take that clip and drop,
it's like an epilogue, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of a strange epilogue, and it does, I think that's what maybe why somehow, like, at the end of the movie it does feel a little weird. Like, I think why
I mean, yeah, because then you lose CGI Leia, which I would be happy with, but maybe they like included CGI Leia in there to make a point that they could make a CGI Leia. I don't know.
Well, I mean, they could have done it and just had it and said, what is that? It's saying, what is that? It's hope. And then her ship could take off, and then they could deal with the fact that the planet's exploding.
Yeah. But then, I mean, you also then lose Vader carving up the rebels, which I will admit is a cool scene.
Yeah.
But it does feel very disconnected from everything else. And I mean, but then you also lose, probably for the good, that whole thing of like the door is open just a couple inches, and rather than just passing the thing through immediately, I'm gonna keep trying to open the door. It's just like the whole time in my head, I'm just yelling, just hand the disc through the door. Just hand it to someone. You're plenty of room to hand. And then finally doing, like, you could have done that minutes ago.
And it's like, does the disc actually have like a gold Death Star on it?
Oh, I don't know. I know there's like some kind of circle on it, but I don't know if I don't think that's
that would have been a little too on the nose, but
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess that's all I have to say about the score. I would say that overall, as a piece of music that I sit down and listen to, I enjoy it. I can totally understand where you're coming from with it. It didn't really fit the bill for you, and it does kind of leave us in this weird place in the future of like, I'm totally sure that John Williams is going to have something great for episode 8. So I'm not worried. That's all taken care of. And I'm not I'm not even knocking him for The Force Awakens. I'm just saying that for some reason I really connected to this one in a really strange way, because it's like, I don't know, I'm not trying to be a contrarian or anything. I don't know, maybe I'm adding the X factor of my own interpretations of it, and that there's actually, if I really sat down and thought about it, there's a lot less there than there should be, but yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm kind of, I'm sad that I'm sad you didn't get anything out of it, but I totally respect why you didn't. It's not like
and I totally respect that you love it.
I totally respect that don't know.
I totally respect your feelings.
Yeah, I think it's all right for that men can respect each other about their musical choices and not have it be like aggressive. So I think that we're like a really good podcast for like guys of a certain age that don't like want to play into the anger.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, so let's then pivot using a line that you mentioned earlier that's in our rundown, which is, this came up in the Art of Rogue One book, which is out now. And it comes at the very end of the book after you've gone through all the designs. There's this, kind of summing up. They did this for The Force Awakens too, of kind of like, what's kind of the main takeaway point? What was the main vibe of the work on this movie? And so they did that for Rogue One as well. And it seems like, the guiding principle that Gareth Edwards kind of gave to the designers was, go off of how you remember it being A New Hope. Go off how you remember it, not how it was. And so you see that with specifically, say the cargo, the AT-ACTs, where they're kind of like a little, to me they seem a little taller and a little thinner, and the
exactly
the cockpit or the face of the thing is slightly different. And that was basically, they like, oh well, we thought we remembered what they looked like, but it turns out they look different. And then Gareth Edwards just told us to design them how we remembered it, how we wanted them to look based on how we remembered it. And that came in various other places as well. And so just, we don't have to talk about the art necessarily. I could, but I kind of wanted to get back to talking about Rogue One versus The Force Awakens a little bit, and just this idea of kind of nostalgia and how the kind of the two different approaches that were taken with these two movies, and again, not to say that one was any better than the other, but the nostalgia kind of manifested themselves in different ways, right? Where with J.J. Abrams, he was like, I got to put a cantina scene in there,
right?
And it's a little different too, right? Because they were designing a movie that takes 30 years later, and with Rogue One, they multiple people said they thought of it as like a period film, right? A period piece. And so just this idea that J.J. Abrams, he said, okay, let's put in a cantina scene. Let's, make all of these kind of very specific references. Let's put a lady on a desert planet and then she leaves the desert planet, and that's her hero's journey, is leaving a desert planet, right? And let's put, he's Darth Vader's grandson, and so he patterns himself after Darth Vader, right? Let's make these kind of specific references to not just A New Hope, but to Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes, all of the original trilogy, basically. Mm-hmm. And Rogue One, they made specific references as well, and we talked about that a little bit last week, but and there certainly was a nostalgia for A New Hope, and Gareth Edwards was certainly excited to make it. It just seems like the way that they approached that was a little different, and it's capturing like the feeling of Star Wars. And J.J. Abrams talked too about how The Force Awakens had to feel like Star Wars, and it apparently for some people that was less successful than for others. But just you have these two directors who love Star Wars, and we're like, oh, I'm gonna kind of make the Star Wars movie that I would want to make, but still referencing the original films. But we got two very different ways of doing that. So I wanted to kind of, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, or just this idea of, I mean, I don't even know. Yeah, for some of the design things, it's pretty clear that they went with how you remember it, not how it was. But then for others, like John Knoll, like when he made that 3D model of the Death Star to put in this movie, like he went back and referenced the original thing, and they referenced specific dimensions of sets and props, and they they even used old unused footage from A New Hope, right? And did that. And so it's on the one hand, yeah, I get that, and on the other, like, well, you did go a little bit with how it was, not just how you remember it, but that idea of how you remember it, not how it was, and thinking of that in this movie versus The Force Awakens. I mean, I don't know. I feel like in some ways The Force Awakens maybe did hew a little more specifically to how it was, rather than just like how it made you feel at the time. But I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the balance. It's hard because if you do go too far out into how you feel, it's like, well, that's how who feels. Who's doing this? Gareth Edwards. It's like, Gareth, I think he's around my age, but he's English. Mm-hmm. And Star Wars is like, his litany of Star Wars is different, because it's like, we had a couple paperbacks, we had television. I don't know what kind of his structure was in his house, but we didn't have a VCR. It's like, I couldn't just watch Star Wars when I wanted, so we would collect the comics, the sketchbooks. He had the weekly comic series that we never saw, so there was a whole like storylines of this idea that like kind of informed the way he came up with Star Wars. I will say this, that Gareth's view of Star Wars is a lot closer to mine than, say, JJ's would be. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that could be a function of geography, of age. Gosh, it's hard to say. It's like there's a certain kind of, of course, it's 30 years past episode 6, you know, things actually seemed like that used universe seemed like kind of the clean universe kind of idea, where it's like things looked almost cleaner. Like I feel like I got the feeling that Han Solo actually did his laundry, and you know, he's like the kind of guy who would actually go, "I smell terrible."
Right.
Whereas
he got a new jacket somewhere along the way.
Yeah,
Why would he never do that?
Whereas, like, in the other ones, it's like, you know, they didn't concern that, like, the old Star Wars, it's like they didn't concern themselves really, like, even George kind of screwed this up with the prequels. It's like, yeah, people are, they don't eat in Star Wars. They all just kind of, like, take a bite and they throw it. They scrape the plate a little bit. They pour the glass, but they don't drink from the glass. And that kind of thing, whereas it's like The Force Awakens, like, you know, she's eating from this fruit that's obviously like a kiwi with something else stuck in it, and you're just like, oh, is this supposed to be? And she's eating it, and you're watching her. She eats a lot in that movie, and it's like, it's like not that you can't have eating in Star Wars. It's just like that thing where it's like he views like Star Wars like in his mind. I think maybe he saw, you know, Luke ate the entire bar of whatever it was, that food that he pulls out on Dagobah, whereas I just think he takes one bite, goes, this is awful, and he throws it out, and he tries to eat Yoda's stew, and he doesn't like that either. And it's just like, yeah, nobody eats in Star Wars. It's like they all seem to be repulsed by it. And like I think Gareth kind of almost got that. It's like there's very little, like, you know, there's very little there's no eating, there's a lot of like the kind of the boring parts of being a human being. I think it's like, no, it's all about action. And I think that's his views. He kind of stripped away a lot, even though The Force Awakens has a really, really, really fast pace. They do stop and have human concerns. And
yeah. I mean, when the, I guess when they get to Maz's castle, right. And Finn has to kind of tell Rey who he really is, right? Then you get a quieter moment. And then when Han and Leia have their conversation about, you know, I saw him, I saw our son, and, you know, you have the interrogation scenes, which are these kind of character-to-character moments. And Rogue One really only had kind of just the one moment, you know, after Edu, when they all get back in the ship, and, you know, they have that moment about, you know, did you try to kill, were you sent here to kill my father? It's like, well, yeah, but I didn't. You know, that's kind of really the only quiet, well, I get that's the biggest of the kind of the emotional, you know, quiet, let's have a big character scene, you know, that has a lot of resonance to it. You know, there were, you know, I guess you could say there were a few others. The beginning of Jeddah, you know, when they first show up in the city, and you know, Chirrut calls out to Jin, but, you know, there's this kind of like underlying tension of, you don't really know, you're in this strange place and you don't really know what's happening, and so that kind of counterbalances that kind of character driven moment. And you know, at the end with Chirrut, you know, when Baze is, you know, when Chirrut is dying and Baze is, you know, having that moment with him, that's also like, that's a big character moment, but it's in the context of like, there's this battle going on behind them, and so they don't really have a lot of time to spend on it, right? Because then Baze has to like immediately get up and start shooting people.
Yeah.
So yeah, just the way that those beats worked out, and kind of what of Star Wars, and right, one person's making a war movie and the other one isn't, but
I mean, there's a certain deftness to that. I'm sorry, am I interrupting?
No. Just like what of Star Wars are you going to put in your movie? And, you know, J.J. Abrams wanted to bring more of those kinds of moments of, you know, the quiet conversation between Yoda and Luke, or from the original trilogy, or, you know, Luke and Leia talking in Return of the Jedi, or you know, just that moment of, you know, those moments of just a couple characters talking to each other and kind of saying like, so, you know, checking in with each other. So here's some information you need to know, or how are you feeling right now? You know, we got more of those kinds of things in The Force Awakens, I think, than we got in Rogue One.
Yeah. And I think that, I think that's it, and it definitely, you know, it satisfies a different itch in what moviegoers, but I mean, there is something to be said about the way Gareth Edwards took this Star Wars, and the fact that it's kind of like the old school. Again, he's making an old school Star Wars. He kind of did it in some ways an old school way, even though, yeah, okay, well, we go, oh, one of the first things I came out of the thing was like, man, that was violent. I got to go tell my brother not to take my 6-year-old niece to it this weekend because I don't want her to have nightmares. Because I think, like, there's the brain sucking machine and the limping guy with the robot leg. Although I will say this on a personal note, I would have loved that. My dad was a above the knee amputee, and so he had that limp. So I kind of was like, I would have loved that as a kid, but maybe my niece would have been scared. But and also he's not, he rolls back the emotion for this because we don't know these people. We really don't. Even though we know Mon Mothma and Jan Dodonna and all these people, it's like we don't really have feelings about them. And Vader, we have feelings about him, but he's portrayed in a way that you don't have to. All the baggage of him, Padme, and being the little Jedi or whatever, like none of that comes into play with it. It's like a different character. So you don't even have to worry about that. And it's nice because it can in some ways this movie gives people, like fans, a lot more breathing room to interpret things the way they want. And it doesn't close the door, which I feel like in some respects, The Force Awakens kind of compartmentalizes the relationships. It's like I don't get any feeling that, like, say Rey and Finn have any kind of like romantic idea with each other. But I mean, they might expand. It might be expanded. It might not be something they ever do in these ones, and that's fine. But I kind of felt like they were telegraphing that they weren't. They were just friends, kind of thing. And then, but even in, say, like Rogue One, people have said, like, I saw like some think pieces, like, are Baze, Malbus, and Chirrut Imwe, are they a partnership? Are they brothers? Are they a romantic concern? It's like, guess what? It can be whatever you want it to be. Because that's one of the great things when Star Wars they do strip back that implied emotion. It can be anything for anyone. Because you bring that to yourself. It's kind of like what Mark Hamill had said when, like, about Luke. It's like Luke is in some ways a blank slate. You can add what you want to him, and then you get to have your own experience with the movie. And I will say that's one thing that in some ways when they don't you can't really go on the relationship between Jin and Cassian. It's not going anywhere because they both died, and there wasn't enough time. They've had, some people on jury duty have had more time to formulate a relationship than they did. It was like, all right, I'm breaking her out of jail. I'm selling her on this thing. And then we got to come back and then we got to
Right. This all essentially happens over the course of like 2 days, probably.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas it's kind of different because, I mean, hey, A New Hope is kind of like that. It's like in my own mind, I stretch it out to like, oh, well, it was like the span of a week or something like that. Or, R2-D2 and C-3PO were in the Junlin Wastes for like maybe a couple weeks before they got picked up, and then when they got sold and all that stuff. But who knows? It doesn't really matter because it's Star Wars and time is flexible. And I always think it's like the less they explicitly say this is what this is, it's better because I feel like at the end of the day you can add so much more. And I feel like JJ kind of anytime that stuff would happen, he'd kind of round it off a little bit, where he'd close your interpretations of things. And so that's why I feel like a lot of people's takeaway on The Force Awakens had to do with like, well, who's Rey's father? Who's Finn's dad? Who's his parents? What's the deal with so and so? Whereas I think something like this, people can be much more like, well, I think it's this, and I think it's that. I don't know. It's kind of the idea of questioning or quote like, well, I haven't saying like just opening the question to the everyone else, or whether they're saying like, well, I have a take on it and it's this. And like, in some ways Rogue One gives a chance for everybody to be right, because they didn't like draw like these huge like character pieces. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of interesting stories just from these people. You could say, you could write a whole, interesting thing like what was going on with Galen Erso. You know, when did he make this decision to like, just like, I'm just going to build the thing because if they figure out that they can do it without me, then we're screwed. And then like what was the, how long into that? Did that happen right after Lyra got shot? Did that, that
right.
kind of thing? And then,
right. How long was she waiting there? I mean, I the scene with Jin and young Lil Jin and her lamp going out, like I just assumed that was like several days later. I don't think that was that night. Right. It may have been, but like considering Lyra got on the horn with Saw immediately, but I figured she was probably down there a little while. She wasn't down there just for a couple hours.
Yeah, and I think and like even from like someone had I guess had said like, hey, you got all those hyperspace shots that you love, and I'm like, yeah, I did. And that's the thing, it's like that was the one issue, like they kind of did that in The Force Awakens where they go, all right, time to go to this place, and they hit the switch, and then the next thing is they're there, and it's like they didn't give any kind of like, there was no, but then in some shots it's like when when Han and Rey are when they're going to Takodana, and they're having a whole conversation. It's like, well, okay, so were they showing time passing, or they didn't really just, well, we're not going to bother, we don't have time at this point in the movie to show how long it's going to take for Chewie and Rey to get to oh gosh, what's the Octo or whatever, but it's just kind of like, it's just the way they kind of give less JJ like left less space within the realm of the story, even of the movie, of the think like, well, maybe there's conversations that happened that we didn't know about. It's like, right. I feel like everything is just like boom, 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 boom. Whereas I feel like Rogue One, even though it goes on a breakneck pace, I feel like there's enough room in the middle of it to kind of like, what was going on with Bodhi Rook when he defected. I just feel like, I feel like there's still like stories to be told within that little Rogue One bubble. Whereas I feel like that Force Awakens, like, yeah, I'm really excited to hear about what's happening afterwards. And unfortunately, every explanation about what was going on beforehand has been, like, say, Poe Dameron comic has been kind of like lackluster in my opinion. Like, I don't know if I really care about this. Bloodline did a pretty good job, but they stepped around it in a way so they never had to put anything out that they would have to go around and contradict.
Right.
So it's that kind of that kind of thing, I guess.
Well, so just to finish wrapping up Rogue One, I guess you had a big question after you saw the movie, which is, where were the Wookiees?
Yeah, where were those Wookiees?
You wanted Wookiees, right? Speaking of how you remember it versus how it was, you wanted Wookiees. Where were these Wookiees at? Well,
I mean, yeah, especially the fact that, in some ways that Rogue One was in a, how should I put this? It was like Gareth Edwards' love letter to what was happening in his mind. Is his love letter to George Lucas about what was inspired in his own mind. That idea, because like in some way Rogue One is like like the $200 million version of the kind of what we used to do with our toys. You know what I mean? It's like, well, we've got to get the plans, and this is what the base is, and that kind of thing. Well, one of the great things about that always happened in the great lexicon of Star Wars is that these Wookiees, that they were these incredible warriors. Now, George had this weird idea that he couldn't use Wookiees in episode 6, and that's why the Ewoks were created. Because
he's like, well, we already have a Wookiee.
He wanted to establish this idea of primitivism over technology, which I don't really feel like, I really shouldn't be criticizing a Jedi after all this time again. But I always felt like, he tried to make up for it in episode 3, and then I just felt like he cheaped out on it, because all the Wookiee, there was only like 6 Wookiee costumes, and even Chewbacca didn't look right. They kind of look like the kind of things that people would put on in, at Disneyland and walk around, where it's like, oh, it's not, it looks good, but it's not like movie good. And I've always been disappointed with Wookiees, and I'm thinking, like, why couldn't you have, like Black, Karistan or whatever, like we see that can be other types of Wookiees in the universe. Would it really have hurt to have seen like a Wookiee, having been in Saw Gerrera's group, like maybe like, well, there was that whole thing that happened in, that was supposed to be in the early drawings or the early artwork for the Force Awakens, that at some point Chewbacca was going to have lost his arm, and he was going to have a mechanical arm. We'd heard rumors. Well, why didn't they make up for that and have, if they're going to have like your Bees or Fortunas, couldn't Chewbacca have a cousin that has a mechanical arm and he's got gray fur or something like that, and he doesn't have to have he's got a vest on, maybe as a joke. Maybe they could have done like a riff where he was like wearing cargo pants because, like, Fox back in the 70s had an issue with the Chewbacca thinking that he needed to have pants because people were going to worry ask why is Chewbacca naked? It's like, no, he's not naked. So I think they kind of missed out a real. I would say that's a big criticism that they probably should.
You wanted more Wookiees.
I want some Wookiees.
Yeah, I will say, right. So in the Art of Rogue One book, the original group of rebels who were stealing Death Star plans in John Knoll's treatment, and that they kind of started working off in the pre-production kind of original kind of Blue Sky design phase. It basically had a lot more. It was mostly aliens. I think there were maybe 2 humans, Jin or so, and then someone else. But I guess the Krennic character, who was like a spy within the rebels. But then it was mostly aliens, and there were going to be this pair of aliens in particular, one of which was going to be huge. And so they went through a bunch of different designs for it, and then that eventually became the Moroff character. The Moroff, I can't remember the alien species name.
Yeah, I forget.
But so we sort of got the new version of the Wookiees in there with, and for those of you who don't keep up with all this, Moroff is that kind of shaggy white-haired character with the breathing mask that was part of Saw Gerrera's gang. So right, that was, they wanted to have a Wookiee-like character, but I think early on they were already thinking of, let's create some new aliens. And 2, I mean, I wonder, I mean, it went away from this very quickly, but John Knoll's original treatment for the movie, I mean, his idea was like, look, let's make this really low budget. Like, let's kind of prove that we can make a Star Wars movie for an absurdly, like, a $20 million Star Wars movie, right? If it were like $25 million.
Which is exactly what the first one cost.
Right. He wanted like a very kind of stripped down, bare bones heist movie kind of thing. And so, it could be that when he was thinking of that, he was thinking of like, okay, well, what's a costume that we can do for cheap? Well, Wookiee costumes, that might be too expensive,
right,
to do.
Oh, it's a lot of yak fur.
Yeah. And then you gotta, right. And then you have to like pay your sound editors to come up with the new voices for them and all that stuff.
I don't consider that a viable excuse. I want my Wookiee.
No. I don't even know if that's the reason. It could just be that, and John Knoll, right? One of the reasons he kind of started talking about this, we've covered this, but one of the reasons he started talking about his Rogue One, the idea that became Rogue One with people at ILM, and they eventually told him to pitch Kathleen Kennedy about it, was he saw, and this gets back to our kind of what you remember nostalgia question, right? He saw what The Force Awakens was and what they were doing with it, and then he was like, well, these other ideas for these anthology movies, it was a young Han Solo movie and whatever else, and he was like, I kind of like to see something different, right? He wanted to see like completely new characters that we hadn't, that weren't just the familiar faces and their origin stories. So I think that is probably more likely an explanation for why there aren't Wookiees in this, is because they were kind of keeping to that idea. Now, in terms of the most famous Wookiee, I guess, in Star Wars, I'm talking, of course, about Itchy. Chewbacca, right? So this reminded me of when my wife and I saw the movie together. There's a point. It's like after, I can't remember if it's after Chirrut died, and I can't remember if it's when Baze is like getting shot up, or if it's after that, or it must be around that, where my wife leaned over to me and she whispered, does he turn into Chewbacca now? Because in her mind, she was like, well, there's a lot of radiation around. Oh. He's already got like the long hair and the beard. Like maybe he turns into Chewbacca. Which
I thought you told me that, and I thought she was joking.
I mean,
only half,
sort of,
only half joking.
Yeah. But I laughed, I chuckled about it, and I was like, no, he doesn't turn into Chewbacca. And she was like, well, no, maybe they could. Have like, no,
he's a different
they're different races, they're different species.
Well, that's an interesting. Well, if she's being serious, that is. Well, I mean, that's it's Star Wars. I mean,
Well, but then I started thinking about the character of Baze Malbus and his relationship to Chirrut Imwe, and I came upon this idea that Baze and Chirrut are kind of like the inverse of Han and Chewie from A New Hope, right? Where in A New Hope, right, you have Han Solo and this big furry Wookiee, right? And Han Solo, he's been around the galaxy and he's never seen anything that makes him believe that there's some unseen force that guides his actions and all that kind of stuff. He's a disbeliever. And Chewbacca may or may not be a believer, but he's the one who's like, no, hey, let's take this job. Let's stay with the rebels. Let's, these are our friends now. We let's stay with them.
Right.
And I guess when you bring the prequels in, right, he knew Yoda. He knew that the Jedi had helped try to liberate Kashyyyk or prevent Kashyyyk from being taken over by the separatists or whatever was happening there. It's not entirely clear to me. Right. So you could say like he's at least open to Jedi and the Force being a thing. Whereas then in Rogue One, you have Chirrut and Baze, and Chirrut is, the kind of believer in the Force. He's I'm one with the Force, and the Force is with me, and he has like complete and total faith in the Force guiding him and protecting him. And then his big furry protector is Baze. He's the one who doesn't believe, and yes, maybe he was the biggest believer of them all at one point, but he's at the point where like he's just like, yeah, the Force is, I'm just here to make sure that guy doesn't get himself killed. Right? He's like, whatever, I'm just kind of along for the ride with him. And so it's this kind of flip in some ways of the relationship of Han and Chewie and their kind of relationship to this broader rebellion, their openness to this broader kind of rebellion in the Force and fighting the Empire.
Well, it is kind of it's an interesting dichotomy of it, because it's it's not to act like I'm some kind of, biblical scholar, but it's almost like the kind of like if they were the keepers of the flame and the flame's no longer there, it's almost like I can't believe I'm saying this because I used to get so mad anytime someone would try to draw parallels to Christianity and Star Wars, but just the idea of like, well, they're kind of like disciples, like they don't have anything to do, and they're like, well, what are we doing? Yeah. And it's like he's the, Baze is kind of the doubting Thomas, and maybe you could say Chirrut. Well, I mean, you don't want to be too literal about the blindness, but of Saul Paul. But it's just the idea of that you could make the interpretation that there, things have its time. The cynicism of Baze Malbus, it like has its place. Because it feeds the body in the fact that, he's probably out there like going, getting food, protecting his friend, in this dangerous, harsh environment. Cause I mean, we won't be able to get to it this week, but like Jeddah is an very interesting place, as far as like some of the visual guide has some very interesting cast of characters in there, but the idea that, he kind of feeds them by protection. And then like in some ways, Chirrut kind of feeds the soul. You know what I mean? The idea that he's so into it that it's just ridiculous. It's like, oh, he just says that thing over and over and over and over. And it drives me nuts all the time. I'm out there like saving his ass. Probably he's the guy who probably has to go out and get like food because it's like, well, every time he goes, they keep selling him rotten apples or something. And then but at the end, when he dies, he realizes the sacrifice in it. The thing that Baze needed so badly is he needed something to fight for. Something to believe in, something to like kill his cynicism. And in some ways, it's like, that's when Chirrut really kind of pays him back, so to speak. And then he becomes like, he starts to see the bigger picture. Whereas I feel in some ways Baze was kind of like, well, were we going here? What? Let's just go. We're going here? All right, that's fine. As long as I've got my gun and my vacuum cleaner on my back, I'll be fine. I just got to keep my eye on this guy,
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with your take on that. Was that too far out?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think especially as, George Lucas started explicitly reaching for those kind of archetypes, and, that has filtered through to other Star Wars work. I mean, I think making those analogies to biblical characters or other kind of ancient mythological characters makes sense to me. That and strikes me as plausible. So, I mean, I think that's also a good pivot to talk about, where might we see some of these characters show up next? And obviously in universe timeline, they are dead, but,
dead and dusty.
We've already seen and heard that Saw Gerrera is going to show up on Rebels. It's been noted that, in the Rogue One visual guide, which I think you picked up, on the Cassian Andor profile, one of his listed aliases is Fulcrum, which originated on Rebels and is kind of a the code name for rebel, not necessarily informants, but people who are kind of organizing rebellion or saying, hey, here's some information about a way that you can get some more resources, or here's a planet that needs help, or here's a base that's unguarded and you can steal some ships from it, that sort of thing. And originally that was Ahsoka Tano. Within Rebels right now, that is
oh gosh, what's his name? I forget it too.
Sideburns,
Mr. Sideburns.
Yeah. Agent Callus.
Yeah, Agent Callus.
Maybe not for long.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to think that Fulcrum is just one person. That's just maybe a generic code name that gets used by multiple people. But, it's possible that, we see something happen to Callus and maybe Cassian Andor shows up as the new Fulcrum in future seasons. I especially as they are kind of guardians of the wills and attached to a Jedi temple, the Kyber Temple, as it was called. I could see maybe Ezra and Kanan finding the Kyber Temple or having to go there for something and running across either Chirrut or Baze or both, or some of the other, even just that idea of these guardians of the wills, people who are connected to these temples. I could see that, that idea showing up in Rebels as well. We talked a little bit last week about, comic books or books where they might show up, but
I'd love for these,
Krennic,
yeah,
as they fill in more of that kind of imperial bureaucratic history pre A New Hope, Krennic may show up again somewhere. So I think it's possible that we'll see, a lot of these people show up elsewhere. I don't know so much about Bodhi Rook.
I don't know. Maybe.
And Jyn Erso, I feel like maybe not, but
I don't know. It'll be interesting. I mean, it's definitely the onus is on the storyteller to make these stories interesting, because I feel like it's like there's not a lot left there unless it was going to be like a Saw Gerrera thing, but we're getting Saw Gerrera in Rebels here coming up Saturday, I guess is the premiere. I mean, I love the Rebels to go to Jeddah now that it's a thing, now that they can talk about it. Although I don't know, who knows if they want to get too much. I know that there's going to be some kind of stuff in episode 8 where they're going to kind of maybe reorientate some stuff about the Force. So maybe they don't want to have to contradict anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's some place like I said, I would a 5-issue Chirrut and Baze comic series would be great. I don't know if anything like that would work really great in a book format, especially since a lot of the appeal is the kind of the visuals, and you can do that better in either an animated situation or a comic book. So you've seen, so I guess there's 2 things I want to cover before we finish up, because I don't know what we're doing on time. Is that one about the Rebels thing? So you saw the
so today they released the mid-season trailer for the second half of season 3 of Rebels. Saw Gerrera confirmed he's in there. Mon Mothma shows up, which I think is a little interesting. And Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up, and he's going to be voiced by Stephen Stanton, who is currently doing Tarkin on Rebels. He also was the voice of Admiral Raddus in Rogue One. He's going to play old Ben Kenobi, who it looks like, well, I don't want to spoil it for people. If they don't want it spoiled for them, I'll leave it up to them whether they want to watch the trailer or not to see what he's doing. But the TIE Defender, it seems like, Thrawn is maybe going to start doing more.
Well, did you see speaking of Thrawn, did you see who he's hanging out with now?
Oh, the Death Troopers?
He's got Death Troopers now.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, what happened to... So, like, when the planet blows up, does that mean all the Death Troopers are gone? And obviously this is beforehand, so it doesn't really matter. But
right. I mean, it's... I think we are going to see some more Rogue One references. I think either Dave Filoni or Pablo Hidalgo or both kind of mentioned that, okay, now that Rogue One is out, you're going to see more of that stuff pop up in Rebels, that they were just kind of waiting for Rogue One to hit, and then they were going to kind of make more references to it. But they didn't feel like they could put those in the show in the episodes that were going to air before Rogue One. So, yeah, I think we're going to see more of that kind of stuff show up in the show. Yeah,
I mean, I'm interested. I'm excited about this thing. It's just amazing how much Star Wars there is to consume right now. It's almost like could do a show this long every week. Oh wait, we do. It's like, but it's like, I'm excited. Some of the stuff, I mean, I'll wait till it comes up to talk about it. Cause I don't, like I said, if people are maybe thinking about this, I don't want to spoil it for them, but, it kind of, I feel, I don't know. I can't remember where we left how my feelings were at the end of the mid-season, like this artificial mid-season thing is still rather new to me. It's like, it's not an actual narrative break in the way, because when you go out and you get them on video, or if you watch them later, binge watch them, mid-season breaks don't really mean much to anybody. It's just like,
yeah, I mean, I wonder, and I guess we'll find out as we watch the show, but when I heard that, like, oh yeah, we're going to start referencing Rogue One more in the show, I kind of wondered if maybe they should have just waited to and worked with Disney to say, like, you know what, maybe we're going to start airing season 3 after Rogue One comes out, and that way we can just like put it in the entire season and then restructure the season so that, because I feel like now knowing that, I wonder if, like, well, so how much of this first half of the season was just them kind of like marking time and just, well, we need to air some episodes, but we can't really reveal too much about, our main arc or this other thing because it connects too much to Rogue One. So let's just put this episode, let's put this episode in there that, doesn't really make a difference to anything. I kind of wonder how much we'll look back on season 3 and see that and work. And maybe not. Maybe it'll come to pass that at the end of the season, everything will make sense, and the first half of the season will go, oh yeah, great, I see what they were doing there. But I don't know. It's felt so disjointed to me so far that I wonder how much of that is because they were waiting for Rogue One to come out before they could do a lot of the stuff that they actually wanted to do.
That's the one thing I always kind of wish they'd make a decision whether or not this is just like this is an essential part of enjoying this new era of Star Wars, or this is kind of just something to keep kids interested in Star Wars. It's like, if you're going to have these like big tie-ins, you better make them pay off. And, I hopefully, like I said in the clip, they are showing like, say, Thrawn is going to be a bigger part of this. He's not, he was already starting to be. Really, they didn't show a lot of him. They showed he has Death Troopers, and then he's like into Krav Maga or something, or hot yoga in his room when he's getting ready to fight. But
yeah, we've got a sleeveless Thrawn there,
exactly, showing off his guns.
Cut.
And I guess we'll just leave it at that, except for one last thing, and maybe we'll just do a quick run. So the big rumor right now, I guess we probably should have talked about this earlier, is in the Han Solo movie that Woody Harrelson is in talks to play some kind of mentor to Han Solo in the Han Solo film. What do we think about this?
I mean, I think we both have a similar position, which is that, like, yeah, Woody Harrelson's not bad. He's been doing good work lately, but Star Wars movie, I don't know. And I was thinking about this too in relation to who, the fact that Mads Mikkelsen is in Rogue One and Forrest Whitaker, and then in Episode 8 we're getting Laura Dern and Benicio del Toro, and who knows who's going to show up in Episode 9, and right. We're getting to the point now where the original movies, and even to some extent the prequels, less so the prequels, but certainly the original movies, it was even as Harrison Ford went on to have a very big career, and Mark Hamill had a diverse career, and Carrie Fisher went on to write and do all sorts of things. It's it's sort of like, even with Harrison Ford, it's like, well, he first became really popular because of Star Wars, and like that's kind of why we know who they are as actors, and that's I think they're gonna try to keep some of that dynamic with some of their younger cast members that they include, but I wonder now if it's just going to become a thing where, like, oh sure, everyone, when you become an actor at a certain point in career, you just do, I'll do a Star Wars, just like the way you just kind of do a Marvel movie, and you become the mentor scientist or the villain, and you do a Marvel movie, and then you can say that you've done a Marvel movie, and you can cash the Marvel checks forever, right? And so I just wonder if that's going to become a thing where it's like, yep, you get to a certain point in career, and then you do a Star Wars movie, and then you cash Star Wars checks forever. And it's just like, I'm sure all of these directors and casting directors are looking for something specific, and they the casting choices they've made so far have been just fine. Mads Mikkelsen is good in Rogue One and everything, and I'm sure Laura Dern will be good in Episode 8, but It is a little weird now to hear like these like big name people who have been famous for, in Woody Harrelson's case,
30.
Cheers was what, like 30 years ago? So like he's been famous for 30 years, and then he's like, oh, and he's going to come into this Star Wars movie. It's like,
well, and he also just
they did that with Alec Guinness, but then to have that consistently happen, like movie after movie after movie, it's a little different.
Yeah, and it's like, it's like, I like Woody. I do. I think some really that first season of True Detective was fantastic. And it's definitely not a dig on him. It's just, he also, though, it's like he just did a 4-movie run in the Hunger Games movies. And it's like,
as a mentor type character,
and it's like, I'm not saying that it's not a deal breaker, but there's like, I was just thinking like, who would I have that was around that? And I was just thinking about somebody that was terribly, and this is even almost tangentially Star Wars related because it was a Josh Trank production. You know who Reg E. Cathy is? Cathy?
That name sounds familiar, but
have you seen House of Cards?
The British one or the American one?
The American one.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, he's an actor. He was in he played Frank Storm in the father of Michael B. Jordan and the girl, I forget her name, in Fantastic Four. And every time I see him,
I'm looking him up. Yeah.
Every time I see him, I'm like that guy. He's like either you like him or he scares the hell out of me. And I'm thinking like, he'd be really good. He played a warden on like a season of Oz, like that really freaky HBO show about prison.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, see, that's a guy, he hasn't done anything like, so it's like, I don't go, oh yeah, I remember him from Cheers, and I remember him from Kingpin, and I remember him from, everything, but from the Hunger Games. I'm not saying that, like I said, not a deal breaker with Woody. I like Woody a lot. I'm sure Woody's got all the talent, so like maybe he can, if he doesn't have that drawl that he kind of has, maybe he might want to modulate his voice. Maybe not too. We
just need J.K. Simmons to show up and we'll be set.
Yeah, see, no, that's a deal breaker. No J.K. Simmons. I love J.K. Simmons, but I don't want him in a Star Wars movie because he's like too much.
He's J.K. Simmons.
He's J.K. Simmons. He's an Eminem, man. I can't have that.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
from doing State Farm insurance commercials to Star Wars.
Exactly. Actually, he's Farmers, but
oh yeah, whatever.
They are a sponsor.
But it's some farm.
It's some insurance. You don't have insurance. That insurance are for people that think something bad's going to happen.
Right.
But I think we should wrap it up. I'm getting real punchy when I start talking about biblical characters, and I think that music analysis might have tapped the last brain cell I had.
We've officially wrapped up Rogue One.
Yes.
Next week we'll come back with something else.
We'll never speak of Rogue One again.
No.
We'll pretend it never happened. Yeah, we got comics. We're going to be coming into this Rebels mid-season premiere we can talk about, and all the hot takes of the hot news. Like I say, if you want to reach out, and you don't have our phone numbers, you can use hosts. That's host with an S at the end at Talking Birdcast. We are on Twitter at Talking Birdcast. We have a website, www.talkingbirdcast.com. And that same way, you can go www.talkingbirdcast.com/Amazon. And that is our Amazon affiliate link. It's the way you can help us out a little bit with offset the cost of hosting this highly informative Star Wars podcast. I think that's about all I have to say. Do you have anything to add?
No. Thanks again for listening, everyone. Hosts at Talking Birdcast.
Okay.
At Talking Birdcast.
I have been Robert Zachary.
And I'm still John Llewellyn.
Thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.
Kelly, my darling, you are my sunshine. When we're together, I feel fine. Your smile is so lovely, your hair is so clean. You make me feel that the whole world is mine. Kelly, 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 Kelly. Kelly, why? Because you're Kelly, 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 Kelly of mine. Mine, 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 mine.
Woody, that was beautiful. You really liked it?
Oh, I liked it more than anything.
Thanks.
So, where's my gift?